Sophia Reynolds sat in her family's opulent drawing room, surrounded by the symbols of wealth and prestige that had defined her life. The high ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and expensive artwork on the walls were all testaments to the prosperity her family had enjoyed for generations. But now, these trappings of luxury felt suffocating. Sophia's parents, Thomas and Margaret Reynolds, were seated across from her, their faces lined with worry. "Sophia, you must understand," her father began, his voice heavy with the weight of the situation. "The business is in trouble. We're on the brink of bankruptcy, and we have no other options." Sophia's heart sank as she listened to her father's words. The Reynolds family had built their fortune over decades, and the idea of losing everything was unthinkable to them. But the solution her parents proposed was even more unbearable. "We've arranged a marriage for you," her mother said, her tone firm but not unkind. "He's from a very wealthy family, one that can save us from this disaster. It's the only way." Sophia's stomach churned. An arranged marriage? In this day and age? The concept seemed archaic, something out of a period drama, not her reality. "But I don't even know him," Sophia protested, her voice trembling. "How can you expect me to marry a man I've never met?" Her mother reached across the table and took her hand. "Sophia, we're doing this for the family. You've always been our hope, our future. We know it's not what you wanted, but sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the greater good." Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes. "But what about love? What about my happiness?" Her father sighed deeply. "Love can grow, Sophia. Your mother and I didn't have much choice in our marriage either, but we learned to love each other over time. We're not asking you to do something we haven't done ourselves." Sophia looked at her parents, feeling a mixture of anger, sadness, and helplessness. She had always been a dutiful daughter, but this was too much. How could they expect her to give up her dreams, her hopes for a future filled with love and passion, for the sake of a business deal? Over the next few days, Sophia's mind was in turmoil. Her parents continued to plan the wedding as if her objections had never been voiced. She was measured for a gown, shown a list of potential venues, and even introduced to a wedding planner who spoke excitedly about floral arrangements and color schemes. But every detail, every mention of the ceremony, felt like another brick being added to the wall that was closing in around her. Sophia retreated to her room whenever she could, seeking solace in the familiar surroundings that had once brought her comfort. But now, even her sanctuary felt like a prison. The thought of marrying a stranger, of being bound to a man she had never seen, filled her with dread. She had always dreamed of a love like the ones in the novels she devoured, passionate, deep, and true. But now, those dreams seemed impossible, slipping through her fingers like sand. She tried to talk to her parents again, to make them see how unhappy this made her. But they were resolute. "Sophia, this is bigger than just you," her father said sternly. "This is about the survival of our family. You need to be strong." Her mother, though softer in her approach, was just as unyielding. "We know this isn't what you wanted, darling, but sometimes life doesn't give us what we want. It gives us what we need." But Sophia couldn't accept that. She couldn't accept a life devoid of choice, of love, of freedom. The more her parents pushed her toward the marriage, the more she felt the walls closing in, until she could hardly breathe. As the wedding day drew nearer, Sophia's desperation grew. Every night, as she lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, she could feel the weight of her impending fate pressing down on her. She knew that if she didn't do something soon, she would be trapped in a life she didn't want, married to a man she didn't love. Then one night, as she tossed and turned, an idea took root in her mind. It was risky, dangerous even, but it was her only way out. She would run away. It was the only way to reclaim her life, to escape the future that had been forced upon her. The idea terrified her. Leaving behind everything she had ever known, venturing into a world where she had no safety net, no one to rely on. But the alternative was worse. She couldn't bear the thought of standing at the altar, saying vows she didn't mean, promising her life to a stranger. No, she couldn't let that happen. Sophia began to plan her escape in secret. She gathered what little money she had saved over the years, packed a small bag with essentials, and studied maps of nearby cities where she might be able to start over. She would need to leave on the morning of the wedding, when everyone was distracted with last-minute preparations. It was her only chance. As the day approached, Sophia's anxiety grew. Every interaction with her parents, every mention of the wedding felt like a knife twisting in her heart. She was racked with guilt over what she was about to do. How would her parents react when they discovered she was gone? But she couldn't let that stop her. She had to be strong. The night before the wedding, the Reynolds estate was alive with activity. Servants rushed around, preparing the house for the big day, while Sophia's parents hosted a small gathering of close friends and family. Everyone was in high spirits, celebrating the union that was supposed to save the Reynolds' fortune. But Sophia couldn't bring herself to join the festivities. She stayed in her room, her heart pounding in her chest, her mind racing with thoughts of what was to come. She knew that tonight was the last night she would spend in this house, the last night she would see her parents, at least for a long time. The thought filled her with a deep sadness, but also with resolve. She couldn't back out now. As the house grew quiet and the guests departed, Sophia quietly packed the last of her belongings into her bag. She laid out the dress she was supposed to wear the next day, a beautiful gown of ivory silk and lace, and stared at it for a long time. It was everything she had ever dreamed of wearing on her wedding day, but now it represented everything she wanted to escape. She didn't sleep that night, too consumed by nerves and anticipation. She listened as the sounds of the house faded, the last lights were turned off, and her parents retired to their room. Finally, when the house was completely still, she slipped out of bed and dressed in simple clothes. She pulled on her coat, grabbed her bag, and took one last look around her room. She felt a pang of sorrow as she quietly opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The house was dark and silent, the only sound the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. She moved carefully, her heart pounding with every step as she made her way down the stairs and through the back door into the night. The cool night air hit Sophia's face as she stepped outside, and for a moment, she hesitated. The estate, with its manicured gardens and grand architecture, had been her home for her entire life. But now, it was just a symbol of everything she wanted to leave behind. Sophia took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. She knew that once she crossed the threshold, there would be no turning back. She had arranged for a taxi to meet her at the edge of the estate, hidden away from the prying eyes of any night watchman or staff who might still be awake. The walk to the gate seemed to take forever, each step weighed down by the enormity of what she was doing. When she finally reached the gate, she paused, looking back one last time at the house she had called home for so many years. A wave of emotions crashed over her: fear, guilt, sadness, but also a glimmer of hope. She didn't linger. The taxi was waiting, just as she had arranged. The driver, an older man with a kind face, didn't ask any questions as she climbed into the back seat. "Where to, miss?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Just as far as you can take me," Sophia replied, her voice shaking slightly. She hadn't decided on a specific destination yet, but anywhere was better than here. The taxi pulled away from the gate, and as the estate disappeared from view, Sophia felt a strange mix of liberation and terror. She was free, but what did that freedom mean? Where would she go? What kind of life could she possibly build on her own? But as the city lights faded into the distance and the open road stretched out before her, Sophia knew one thing for certain. Whatever the future held, it would be a future of her own making. No one else would decide her fate. And so, with a heart full of uncertainty but a spirit newly awakened, Sophia embarked on her journey into the unknown. The city was bustling with life, a stark contrast to the quiet, controlled environment Sophia had left behind. Tall buildings loomed above her, and the streets were filled with people rushing to and fro, each absorbed in their own lives. It was overwhelming, but also exhilarating. For the first time in her life, Sophia was anonymous, a face in the crowd, unburdened by the expectations and responsibilities that had weighed her down for so long. After several days of searching, Sophia found a small apartment in a modest neighborhood. It was nothing like the grand estate she had grown up in, but it was hers. The walls were bare, the furniture sparse, but the freedom it represented made it feel like a palace. Sophia had no one to answer to, no plans to follow but her own. With her savings dwindling, Sophia knew she needed to find a job quickly. She spent her days scouring the city for work, walking from shop to shop, office to office, inquiring about any openings. It was humbling work. She was used to having everything handed to her, never needing to fend for herself, but she refused to give up. One day, while passing a fine dining restaurant with an elegant facade, she noticed a help wanted sign in the window. The restaurant, with its white tablecloths and crystal chandeliers, reminded her of the life she had left behind, yet also seemed like a world apart. She hesitated, wondering if she was cut out for such a job, but then pushed her doubts aside and stepped inside. The manager, a sharp-eyed woman named Lydia, looked Sophia up and down with a critical eye. "Do you have any experience in fine dining?" she asked, her tone skeptical. Sophia shook her head. "No, but I'm a quick learner, and I'm willing to work hard." Lydia raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed, but something in Sophia's determination must have struck a chord with her. "We'll start you as a hostess," she said after a long pause. "It's not glamorous, but it's a start. Can you start tomorrow?" Sophia nodded eagerly, her heart lifting. "Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much." As Sophia left the restaurant, a sense of accomplishment washed over her. It was a small victory, but it was a start. She had taken the first step toward building a new life, one of her own making. Across the city, another story was unfolding. Alexander Carter, heir to a multi-billion-dollar business empire, had arrived in the same city. Like Sophia, he had fled from an arranged marriage he had no desire to partake in. The pressure from his parents, the constant reminders of his duty to the family, had driven him to the breaking point. He couldn't marry a woman he had never met, someone he couldn't love. So, he had left, slipping away in the dead of night, much like Sophia had. But unlike Sophia, Alexander had left behind not just wealth, but a life of comfort and privilege that had never prepared him for the real world. He found himself alone in a strange city, with no friends, no connections, and no clear idea of what to do next. His funds were limited. He had taken only what he could carry without raising suspicion, and he knew he needed to find work fast. After days of searching and facing rejection after rejection, Alexander finally found a job at a fine dining restaurant. It wasn't glamorous, but it was work, and that was what he needed. The manager, Lydia, seemed to recognize something in him, a sharpness, a determination that set him apart from the other applicants. She hired him as a server, warning him that the job would be demanding. Alexander took the job without hesitation. He was determined to prove that he could make it on his own, without his family's influence or wealth. He wanted to start fresh, to live a life on his own terms. What he didn't know was that the decision to take that job would change his life forever. On Sophia's first day at the restaurant, she was nervous but determined. Lydia showed her the ropes, how to greet customers, manage reservations, and keep things running smoothly at the front of the house. It was a lot to take in, but Sophia was a quick learner, and by the end of the day, she was starting to feel more confident. As the evening rush began, Sophia found herself overwhelmed by the sheer volume of customers. The restaurant was one of the most popular in the city, and the constant stream of patrons was daunting. She was so focused on her tasks that she barely noticed when a tall, dark-haired man approached the hostess stand. "Hi, I'm Alex, the new server." He introduced himself, his voice warm and friendly. "Lydia said you might need some help." Sophia looked up, startled, and met his eyes. There was something about him, a calm confidence, a kindness, that immediately put her at ease. "I'm Sophia," she replied, smiling despite her nerves. "Yes, I could definitely use some help." As the night went on, Sophia and Alex worked side by side, their interactions easy and natural. They quickly fell into a rhythm, complementing each other's strengths and covering for each other's weaknesses. By the end of the night, They were laughing and joking like old friends. After their shifts ended, they sat together at the bar, sharing a late-night meal. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and they soon found themselves sharing more personal details about their lives. When Sophia mentioned that she had recently run away from home to escape an arranged marriage, Alex's eyes widened. "No way," he said, laughing in disbelief. "I did the same thing." Sophia stared at him, equally stunned. "Are you serious? What are the odds?" They both laughed, the tension of the day melting away as they realized how much they had in common. There was an undeniable connection between them, a shared understanding of what it felt like to break free from the expectations of others. As they left the restaurant that night, Sophia couldn't help but feel that she had found something special in Alex. A kindred spirit, someone who understood her in a way that few people could. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt hopeful. Over the next few months, Sophia and Alex grew closer. Their friendship deepened as they spent more time together, both inside and outside of work. They explored the city together, finding new places to eat, visiting art galleries, and spending lazy afternoons in the park. They were both discovering a new way of living, away from the pressures and expectations that had once defined them. Sophia found herself looking forward to every moment with Alex. He was kind, funny, and attentive, always knowing just what to say to make her laugh or feel better after a long day. And the more time they spent together, the more she realized that her feelings for him were growing into something more than friendship. But Sophia was hesitant to admit her feelings, even to herself. She had run away from an arranged marriage to a man she didn't know. Was it really possible that she had found love so soon after? Was she ready for it? She had spent so long fighting for her independence. Was she ready to open her heart again? Alex, too, found himself thinking more and more about Sophia. He admired her strength, her courage in leaving behind everything she knew to forge her own path. He found himself drawn to her warmth, her intelligence, and the way she could make him smile even on the hardest days. But like Sophia, he was cautious. He had left home to escape a future he didn't want. Was he ready to start thinking about a new future, one that included someone else? One evening, as they were walking home after a late shift, the tension between them finally came to a head. They stopped at a small park, the city lights twinkling around them, and sat on a bench under a tree. "Sophia," Alex began, his voice tentative, "I've been thinking about us." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. She had been thinking about them, too, but hearing him say it made everything feel more real, more serious. "Me too," she replied softly. Alex took a deep breath, turning to face her. "I care about you, Sophia, a lot. And I know we've both been through a lot of changes recently, but I can't help how I feel." Sophia's eyes met his, and she saw the sincerity, the vulnerability in his gaze. It was a look she had never seen before in anyone, a look that told her that Alex wasn't just a friend, but something more. "I care about you too, Alex," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "More than I ever expected." For a moment, they just sat there, the weight of their words hanging in the air between them. Then, slowly, Alex reached out and took Sophia's hand in his. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like a promise, a declaration of something new and beautiful between them. They sat in silence for a while, their hands entwined, the city buzzing around them. Neither of them knew what the future held, but for now, that didn't matter. They had found something special in each other, something worth holding on to. As the weeks passed, Sophia and Alex's relationship blossomed. They were no longer just friends or co-workers. They were partners, sharing their lives and supporting each other in ways they had never thought possible. The love that had begun to bloom between them was now in full bloom, and they knew they wanted to be together, not just in the moment, but for the long term. But as their love deepened, so too did their desire to confront their pasts. They had both run away from their families, from lives that had been planned out for them without their consent. But now, with the strength they had found in each other, they began to realize that they couldn't keep running forever. They needed closure, not just for themselves, but for the sake of their future together. It was Alex who first suggested returning home. They were sitting in their apartment one evening, the city lights casting a warm glow through the windows when he broached the subject. "Sophia," he said gently, "I've been thinking maybe it's time we faced our families together." Sophia looked at him, surprise flickering across her face. She hadn't expected him to say that, but as the words sank in, she realized that he was right. They couldn't move forward without addressing the past, without making peace with the people they had left behind. "You're right," she said quietly. "We can't keep running, but what if they don't accept us? What if they're still angry?" Alex squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Then we'll face it together, but we won't know unless we try." With that decision made, they began to plan their journey back home. It was a daunting prospect, but they were ready to face it together. They would start with Alex's family, then travel to see Sophia's parents. It was time to close the chapter on their old lives and begin a new one. The day they arrived at Alex's family estate, nerves were running high. The mansion loomed before them, grand and imposing, a reminder of the life Alex had left behind. But with Sophia by his side, he felt stronger, more determined to face whatever awaited them. To their surprise, Alex's parents welcomed him back with open arms. They had been devastated by his sudden departure, but they had also had time to reflect on their mistakes. They had realized that they had been wrong to try to force him into a marriage he didn't want, and they were deeply sorry for the pain they had caused. "Alex, we're so sorry," his mother said, tears in her eyes as she embraced him. "We never should have pressured you like that. Can you ever forgive us?" Alex, who had spent so long harboring resentment, felt a wave of relief wash over him. "I forgive you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I'm sorry too, for running away without telling you. But I needed to find my own way." His father, who had always been stern and distant, nodded solemnly. "We understand, son, and we're proud of you for standing up for yourself, for finding your own path." When they introduced Sophia to Alex's parents, the reaction was one of warmth and acceptance. They could see how much she meant to their son, and they welcomed her into the family without hesitation. It was a far cry from the arranged marriage they had once planned, but it was clear that Alex had found something far more precious. With the reconciliation complete, Alex's parents threw themselves into planning a grand wedding, one that would celebrate not just their union, but the love that had brought them back together. Next, Sophia and Alex traveled to her hometown, the place where her journey had begun. As they approached her family's estate, Sophia's heart raced with anxiety. She hadn't spoken to her parents since the night she had left, and she had no idea how they would react to her return. But when she finally stepped through the door, her parents were there, waiting. They had been heartbroken when she left, but like Alex's parents, they had come to realize their mistakes. They had pushed her too hard, and in doing so, they had almost lost her. "Sophia," her mother said, tears streaming down her face, "we're so sorry. We were wrong to try to control your life. Can you ever forgive us?" Sophia felt a lump in her throat as she hugged her mother. "I forgive you," she whispered, "and I'm sorry too for leaving the way I did. But I had to find my own way." Her father, who had always been so focused on the family business, looked at her with a new understanding. "We just wanted what was best for you," he said softly, "but we see now that we went about it the wrong way. We're just glad you're back." When Sophia introduced Alex to her parents, they were shocked to realize that he was the same man they had once tried to arrange her marriage to. But this time, there was no pressure, no obligation. It was clear that Sophia and Alex had found each other on their own terms, and that made all the difference. As their parents met and marveled at the incredible twist of fate that had brought their children together, the past was finally laid to rest. The wedding was planned with joy and excitement, a celebration not just of love, but of the courage it took to find it. On their wedding day, as Sophia and Alex stood together at the altar, surrounded by the people they loved, they couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. They had both run away from a future they didn't want, only to find a future they never could have imagined. And now, as they exchanged vows, they knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. The guests cheered as they kissed, sealing their love with a promise of forever. Their journey had been long and difficult, but it had led them to this moment, a moment of pure happiness. As they walked back down the aisle, hand in hand, Sophia and Alex knew that their story was just beginning. They had faced their fears, overcome their pasts, and found each other in the most unexpected way. And now, with their families reunited and their hearts full of love, they were ready to face whatever the future held. And so, with the blessing of their families and the love of each other, Sophia and Alex began the next chapter of their lives, together, as they were always meant to be. Hope you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to like it and subscribe to our channel. Your participation is essential so that we can continue to bring you more incredible stories. Share it with your friends to help our channel grow. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.